Would you please rise for the national anthem?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the
You may be seated. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the University of Utah School of Medicine 2012 commencement exercises. As the Dean of the School of Medicine, it is my privilege to also welcome distinguished representatives from medicine and higher education who are on stage with us today. I will ask our guests to stand as I introduce them by affiliation, and then ask you to join me in recognizing them at the end with your applause. University of Utah Regents Bonnie Jean Beasley and Carol Murphy, and Board of Trustee Michelle Matson. Both of our regents and trustee are strong supporter of the health sciences and the School of Medicine. Dr. Thomas Parks, Vice President for Research. Dr. Richard Sperry, Associate Vice President for Health Sciences, Academic and Clinical Affairs. And Dr. Jerry Kaplan, Associate Vice President for Health Sciences and Research. Dr. Wayne Samuelson, Vice Dean for Education. Dr. Dean Lee, Vice Dean for Research. Dr. Barbara Cahill, Associate Dean of Professionalism, Accountability, and Assessment. Dr. Jack Dulcourt, Associate Dean of Continuing Medical Education and Medical Graphics and Photography. Dr. Karen Gribben, Associate Dean of Veterans Affairs. Dr. Ed Junkins, Associate Dean of Student Affairs. Dr. Sarah Lamb, Associate Dean of Curriculum, and Dr. Larry Reimer, Associate Dean of Graduate Medical Education. Dr. Benjamin Chan, Assistant Dean of Admissions. Dr. Evelyn Gopez, Assistant Dean of Inclusion and Outreach. Dr. Devon Hale, Assistant Dean of International Medical Education and Idaho Affairs. Dr. Janet Lindsley, Assistant Dean of Curriculum. Dr. Alan Smith, Assistant Dean of Graduate Medical Education, and Dr. Adam Stevenson, Assistant Dean of Curriculum. Finally, I am pleased to acknowledge two people you'll hear from later in the program, Dr. Sandra Baez, President of the University of Utah School of Medicine Alumni Association, and our commencement speaker, Director of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation and Professor of Global Health at the University of Washington, Dr. Christopher Murray. Let's give them a round of applause. On behalf of President David Pershing, I am honored to congratulate the members of the class of 2012. We are here today to celebrate a remarkable milestone. Each of you deserves to be very proud of yourself for your academic achievement. You have worked hard to complete some of the toughest and most intensive graduate programs that this university has to offer. And whether you're receiving an MD, a PhD, a master's degree, or a bachelor's degree, take a moment to let it all soak in. Look around this room and think of all the people who are bursting with pride in you and who helped you arrive at this day. How about a round of applause to show your appreciation for everyone who supported you? I'm sure you've all heard the famous quote by the French classical author Rochefoucauld, who said, "The only thing constant in life is change." You are entering into a world of medicine and science at a time of unprecedented change. Of the many lessons we hope that our faculty have taught you and nurtured in you here at the U is a passion for learning, lifelong learning. During your careers, you will witness remarkable discoveries in science and in medicine, and you will need to integrate these into your clinical practices, your research thinking, and the way you teach others. I hope you will consider the experiences you've had here as merely a foundation, a starting point for continued learning, because if you do, you will serve the community well, not just in the next decade, but for at least the next half century and maybe more. We in the healthcare arena are also experiencing change in the fundamental ways in which we will be expected to serve society. Not only are we expected to discover new insights into disease and new treatments, but we will be held responsible for translating these discoveries into better patient care and doing it in a way that is cost-effective. We will be held responsible for keeping our population healthy and for controlling costs. Now that shouldn't feel so radical. And for those of you who are not in the healthcare profession here today, it may even sound like common sense. But this is a fundamental paradigm shift for our profession, and you all will make it happen. You are the generation of physicians and scientists that is going to help our nation get a handle on the unsustainable $2.7 trillion we spend every year on healthcare. You are the generation that is going to put the United States not on the top of the charts for healthcare spending, but rather on the top of the charts for unparalleled quality of care in the care that we provide and the unrivaled quality of science and discovery. You're the generation that is going to keep patients healthier and happier than we ever saw possible. And we, and the generations represented on this platform, are really cheering for your success. In addition to change, there's one other constant that is really at the heart of why you're here today, and that's the desire to improve the lives of others. Now, I may be a little biased, but I can't think of a profession that has more to do good, has more potential to do good. And I just want to say thank you for choosing the path that you have. Thank you for choosing the University of Utah. And may you embrace the changes ahead as opportunities to shape the future of science and of medicine and of the world. Congratulations, class of 2012. In keeping with tradition, I want to present a brief overview of the graduating class. There are 100 students who will receive a Doctor of Medicine degree today. There are 50 students who have earned their Doctor of Philosophy degrees. 121 students are receiving master degrees. And 25 students are receiving Bachelor of Science degrees in Medical Laboratory Science and Medical Technology. And one student is graduating summa cum laude with a Bachelor of University Studies Public Health degree. A handful of members of this graduating class, along with some of the distinguished faculty who taught them, received special awards and honors earlier this week, and I call your attention to their names in the back of the program. This year, the School of Medicine had 5 faculty members receive university-wide awards. I will ask our faculty members to stand as I announce their award, and then ask you to join me in recognizing their accomplishment at the end with your applause. Dr. Kathleen B. Degree, Professor of Neurology and Ophthalmology, and Dr. Michael W. Varner, Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology, were honored with the Rosenblatt Prize for Excellence, the University of Utah's most prestigious award. The award is presented annually to a faculty member who displays excellence in teaching, research, and administrative efforts. And this year, for the first time ever, the award has been given to a couple, a married couple. Dr. Chubin Chen received the Graduate and Postdoctoral Scholar Distinguished Mentor Award posthumously. Mentor awards recognize faculty who effectively guide graduate students and postdoctoral scholars throughout their professional training. His widow, Dr. Nicola Hack, is here today with us. Dr. Hack, will you please stand? Bonnie J. Beatty, Professor of Pediatrics, received the Distinguished University Teaching Award. The award honors faculty making significant contributions to the teaching mission of the University of Utah. Dr. Robert Mark in the Department of Ophthalmology and Visual Sciences was honored with the rank of Distinguished Professor. This rank is reserved for faculty members whose achievements exemplify the highest goals of scholarship and whose record includes evidence of a high dedication to teaching. Let's acknowledge the successes of these faculty members. Now I am pleased to welcome Dr. Christopher Murray, Professor of Global Health at the University of Washington and Director of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, as this year's commencement speaker. Dr. Murray is a physician and a health economist. His early work focused on tuberculosis control and the development of the pioneering Global Burden of Disease Project at Harvard University, work that has been hailed as a major landmark in public health. In his current role with the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, Dr. Murray and his team evaluate the effectiveness of health programs worldwide. His work has led to the development of a range of new methods and studies to strengthen the basis for population health management, measure the performance of public health and medical care systems, and assess the cost-effectiveness of health technologies. It was perhaps childhood experiences that shaped Dr. Murray's interest in health economics and global health. His father was a professor of medicine at the University of Minnesota. During a sabbatical, the family went to Niger in Africa, where the entire family volunteered with the nonprofit organization World Vision. His parents set up and ran a hospital in this area, while Christopher and his siblings helped run the hospital, doing everything from running laboratories to helping with surgeries. From this experience, Dr. Murray says he is still searching for ways to have a bigger impact on people's health in poor countries. Dr. Murray worked at the World Health Organization from 1998 to 2003. He was the director of the Harvard University Initiative for Global Health and the Harvard Center for Population and Development Studies, as well as the Richard Saltonstall Professor of Public Policy at the Harvard School of Public Health. He's also the author or editor of 14 books and more than 130 journal articles in internationally peer-reviewed publications. He holds a Bachelor of Arts and Science degrees from Harvard University, a DPhil in International Health Economics from Oxford University, where he was a Rhodes Scholar, and a medical degree from Harvard Medical School. Please welcome Dr. Christopher Murray to deliver his address entitled, Think Locally, Act Globally.
Well, thank you, Vice President Lee, for those introductory remarks, and good morning, distinguished platform party, friends, family, guests, and of course, the class of 2012. It's actually a great pleasure to be here in Utah. It's one of my wife and I's favorite states, whether it's skiing in Cottonwood Canyon or mountain biking in Moab or slot canyoning in Grand Escalante, we have always enjoyed our frequent visits to this beautiful place. So it's especially an honor for me to be here this morning. Today, as we heard, some of you are receiving bachelor's degrees, others master's, others PhDs, and MDs. What you all share in common is science in the service of humanity. That's a pretty special thing. I think the pursuit of knowledge for knowledge's sake is a worthwhile enterprise and certainly something to be respected. But it's particularly special when we can take the power of science and harness it to do good, to improve people's health around the world. Because you've chosen a path to try to improve people's health through various mechanisms, I'm going to try to share with you some thoughts about how we can all make a bigger impact in the world. Quite far back actually, about a century ago, Patrick Geddes, a Scotsman, came up with a slogan: think global, act local. He was a polymath, but he was primarily an urban planner, thinking about the ways in which what you do in a local community has global impacts on the environment. The phrase was picked up by the environmental movement in the 60s and became quite popularized. There was a popular bumper sticker when I was in school, and the phrase was meant to convey the importance of thinking about what you act on locally in the global context. I think we can turn that phrase around and say, act global, think local. Let me try and tell you what I mean by that. 28 years ago, I was sitting like you in a commencement address. I don't remember who the speaker was. I don't remember what the speaker said, and I suspect that may happen to you too. But nevertheless, the world was a very different place. It was a very easy way to think about the world we lived in. There was the West, there was the East, and there was the Third World. In the West, everyone was pretty much the same. The average family size was 2 children and 2 parents. Men lived about 70 years, women lived about 77 years. Interestingly, in the East, family size was about the same. Men and women had slightly shorter lifespans, but the real difference was with the Third World, where the average family size was 6 children, where people lived usually on average about 50 years. And this was true from places as diverse as Bangladesh, Iran, or Nigeria. At the time, in the media, in public policy, in schools and universities, we worried about East-West tension, and we worried a lot about the population explosion. And also, in 1984, we started to worry about the global recession that was hitting Latin America and other parts of the Third World. Fast forward 3 decades, and we're living in a very different place. Family size is just one indication of the extraordinary social upheaval and transformation in what we used to call the Third World. In Bangladesh, still one of the poorest places on earth, the average family size is now just over 2 children. In Iran, less than 2 children, the same as in the United States. What an incredible change in just 3 decades. These changes aren't just statistics, but they speak to a different nature of the family and a different nature of how societies are organized. Economies have changed. Now, millions of people in Latin America, in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, and particularly in China, live lives like we do, with many of the same creature comforts and the same material goods. You need only travel to Shanghai, which I've done periodically over the last 20 years, to see just what an extraordinary change the world has undergone. It's as if you've stepped into a science fiction movie, the number of skyscrapers and the sort of technology that's present in a city that used to be quite poor. But here we're going to talk about health. Patterns of health have changed the most, perhaps, and they're the most revealing, I believe. As we all know, the health of a community is more than simply healthcare. It's people's education, it's income. It is the quality of healthcare and medical care and public health. But it's also people's lifestyles. The changes in health around the world provide us some real insight into what's driving a new world that we live in. We used to have the 3 divisions for the world, and now I would propose that we can think of the world, at least in health terms, as 5 groups. Half the world, 3.5 billion people, have health that's very similar to us here in the United States. These are places like Chile or Uruguay or Poland in Eastern Europe or Thailand in Southeast Asia or Iran or Egypt or China or Vietnam. These are places that all share one thing in common. Heart disease is the #1 killer. What an incredible change, that we don't have third world health problems and first world health problems, that at least half the world has converged to share the same set of ailments that we have here. Not just heart disease, of course, but lung cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, the challenge of rising diabetes, and of course the challenge of road traffic accidents in young men. There's more in common than there is different for that half of the world. But a third of the world, 2 billion or more people, still live on less than $2 a day. And these poor people are clustered in poor countries, where the average incomes for the governments and for the societies are still very low. Places like Chad or Ethiopia or the Congo or most of South Asia. Places like Papua New Guinea and some of the more disadvantaged islands in Oceania. These are places where still the dominant killers are killers of young children. Pneumonia, diarrhea, malaria in places that have malaria. Where adults suffer TB and other infectious diseases and also have the ravages of non-communicable diseases that we have here. These are places where there is still much to be done. You might ask, what about the rest of the world? I said half and a third. Well, there's 3 pockets in the world that are suffering from particular types of epidemics. There's an enormous global pandemic of HIV, but its focused concentration in Eastern Africa and Southern Africa mean that HIV is the overwhelming health problem in those societies. Death rates have tripled in 20 years. Leading to staggering tolls on societies, on families, and communities. They also have the ongoing burden of their children dying from pneumonia, diarrhea, and malaria. In the former Soviet Union, we have a different epidemic, an epidemic of alcohol-related death, where death rates have doubled and tripled as well. But it's quite specific and particular to those parts of the world. And we have a third epidemic of violent death that stretches from Central America right through Venezuela, Colombia, into Brazil, where the dominant cause of health problems is actually homicide. We worry about homicide in the US, but homicide rates in these societies are 10 times higher than we have here. So our new world does not fit neatly into 3 categories, probably doesn't fit neatly into the 5 I described, but it's a world where we need to be cognizant that societies face different health challenges, but there's still a large segment of humanity that really have profound issues and need our help. I think we have reason to be truly optimistic. We've seen an extraordinary story unfold in the last decade. We've seen the West spend out of their resources much more money on trying to help people in the more disadvantaged places on Earth than ever before. We used to spend $6 billion on health programs in 1990, and now we spend $27 billion a year. And that money isn't just disappearing, it's really having an impact. We see it in the numbers, we see it in the studies, we see it just walking the streets in some of these countries. Antiretrovirals for HIV, delivered through the US President's Emergency Fund for AIDS, through the Global Fund for AIDS, TB, and Malaria, and through many, many NGOs and government programs, have led to an enormous drop in the last 3 or 4 years in HIV-related death. The same as we had in this country in the 90s. The miracle of one patient living, going from near death to a full, vibrant life because of antiretrovirals, is now spread first to thousands, then to hundreds of thousands, and now to millions. The same is true for malaria. Malaria peaked in 2004, but through enormous effort of the international community and national organizations, we've seen it drop by 40%. 40% less children dying from malaria, 40% fewer adults, because of two simple strategies. Giving households bed nets that are treated with insecticide that kill mosquitoes, and better drugs for treating malaria. Combined, we've had dramatic effects. Child death is dropping in some of the worst places on earth, some of the most impoverished. For example, Niger, where I went as a child, where until recently 300 babies died of 1,000 babies died before their 5th birthday. Now that number has dropped in half. Still unacceptably too high, but shows that progress even in the most disadvantaged places is happening, and we can do more. There are many other success stories that I could tell you about for specific diseases and programs in specific communities. The important point is that we can actually see progress, and that progress starts from our willingness to engage and to try to help. You can act globally. I've had the privilege in my life of seeing people who've acted globally. I've seen people that I trained with at the Brigham Hospital, who started Partners in Health, for example, had an impact in multiple countries. I've seen people I worked with at the World Health Organization have enormous impact through policies and programs, and most importantly, I've seen my parents have an impact in Africa. There are many ways that you can act globally. You can work abroad, and I know many of you have already worked abroad and have traveled far and wide. With degrees in medical science, you can make contributions directly. You can act globally here at home. You can work for an organization with global reach. You can do research that the focus of that research is on helping the poor achieve better health and better lives. And even if you pursue other careers in medical science, you can volunteer or support organizations with a global reach. We live in an interconnected world such that it's much more practical and feasible for you to engage on the global scale. I said that half the world is converging on having health like ours, steadily improving, seeing the standards of health in their community advance with each decade. And the other half are either left behind or taking a long time to catch up and need our help. That global understanding, I think, can empower us to see our own communities in the United States in a different light. That can lead us to think about how the global experience around health can let us think more locally about what can be done. Personally, I think we have the best institutions of higher learning in health sciences in the world here in the United States. I also believe that we have the best hospitals. At least some of them are the best in the world. But we do need to face facts and look at the evidence. As a nation, we are the undisputed champions of spending money on healthcare. Vice President Lee commented on this in her opening comments. But we are not the champions of making our communities healthy. While countries like Australia have made steady progress in the last 30 years improving lifespans, we've lagged behind. We've made progress. It's just we've made less progress than our peers. When we go to rank the United States as a nation in terms of health achievement, whether it's for children, for adults, or even just lifespan, amongst the 190 plus countries in the world, we always rank somewhere between 40th and 50th, not even in the top 10, far from it. How is that possible? We do have the best healthcare institutions in many parts of the country, but we are not achieving our potential for good health. Like the globe, there are many communities that make up the United States. Some communities have really great health. For example, in Collier, Florida, or in Marin County, California, men and women have some of the highest lifespans in the world. But in other places, for example, McDowell County, West Virginia, or Quitman County, Mississippi, we have lifespans that look like the poorest of developing countries. The gap between the best off and the worst off communities, just in terms of health, is 12 years for women, 16 years in terms of lifespan for men. Those differences are truly enormous. There are not only disparities in the U.S. When we look at the U.S. in this global context, we see a story generally of progress. Countries have been making steady progress, particularly high-income countries. Then why is it here in this country, more than 600 counties in the U.S., lifespans for women are going down, and 150 counties for men? I don't have the answer. It could be things related to smoking or to obesity. It could be related to the quality of care not improving fast enough in some of these rural communities. But I hope that you will find the answer through your professional lives, because that's what we need now. We really need people in a global context to say why we're the United States. We can certainly do better. We should do the best. Here in Utah, traditionally lifespans have been very long. But you are not immune from this problem as well. Even within the state, there's a 5-year difference in lifespan between Carbon County, for example, and Rich County. More importantly, over the last decade, 21 out of 29 counties in this state have seen progress that's slower than the national average. You've had health advantage in the past, but that advantage is fading unless you do something about it. Here in Salt Lake, lifespan is the same. It's on the par with Chile, with Portugal, and with Slovenia. Those are good outcomes, but surely we can aspire to better. Linking a global view of action to a better understanding of how we are faring as a nation and in the communities we live will strengthen our capacity, I believe, to understand why this is happening and find solutions to our problems here at home. Someone, somewhat jokingly, said to me recently that what I work on is like Moneyball applied to global health. But I'm no Billy Bean, and I'm certainly no Brad Pitt. But that idea is probably right, that by looking at the numbers and looking at the evidence and trying to figure out what's actually working in the world and what is not working helps us gain important insights. But sometimes those insights are unwelcome or are counter-received wisdom. And I think the struggle to make people see what's really happening, to see the truth about progress in health or lack of progress in some places, has led me to gain a few insights, I believe, that I will now try to impart on you at the end of this speech. So I have 5 things for you to remember, I hope. First, to you, the graduates, see the big picture. Everything in your life from now forward is going to drive you to narrow your focus, to be the best at what you do in a particular domain, to master a set of skills and knowledge that will make you more productive and more effective. Mastering your trade is a very good idea, but resist the associated tendency to lose sight of the big picture. Too often at home, in our communities, and even at the national level, we pay huge attention to small things and forget about the big things. In global health, I've spent 20 years, and a good part of those 20 years, working on an attempt to quantify what are people's health problems, to provide a roadmap for what we should pay attention to and how we can find our way to make people's health better. Put it really simply, there's no point knowing the room that you live in so well that you can navigate it in the dark if that room is on a ship heading in the wrong direction. Number 2, be a skeptic. We're bathed in information these days. Unfortunately, most of it's wrong. Most of it's false. Even in science, I think some of the writings of John Ioannidis lately, a series of papers in the last few years that have just documented how often we've been wrong, and how the progress of science eventually tells us that even clinical trials that we believed in turned out to have been giving us the wrong impression because of, for example, publication bias or selection bias. That insight applies not just to science, but to everything you read on the internet and what people tell you. So when somebody comes and tells you something that doesn't seem quite right, you should really ask yourself, well, how do they know? Can you really believe the evidence that they've brought to bear? And how can you convince yourself or validate these claims? This will be important both in your professional and in your community lives. Having said being a skeptic, my third point is the opposite. Be willing to change your mind. As a child, I was a rather difficult child, I'm told. I resolutely refused to eat fruit and vegetables, to the point where my mother took me to our pediatrician and said, "What is there to do?" And the pediatrician wisely said, "Let him eat what he wants." My mother decided that if I was going to eat what I wanted, then I had to cook my own food. She would cook dinner for the family. If I refused, I should cook my own food. So as a 6 or 7-year-old, I came up with creative recipes. My favorite was chicken fried in wishbone salad dressing. So my dislike of fruit and vegetables clouded my judgment, and as evidence accumulated that fruit and vegetables are actually good for you, I refused to believe it, and I was a sort of perennial skeptic. However, eventually the evidence is so strong that even I, much to my disappointment, have had to agree that eating fruit and vegetables is very good for you. In fact, probably 5% of death in the world could be avoided if everybody had 300 grams of fruit a day. I've even taken up eating fruit and vegetables. So the point being is stick true to your beliefs, but eventually concede to the evidence when it is strong. Number 4, be resilient. Being in the information and truth business, sometimes people get really upset at you. Upset people try to hurt you, and sometimes they succeed. This has happened to me many times. When I was at the World Health Organization, we had the great idea to rank the world's health systems from 1 to 190 by performance. This got a lot of attention, and in fact, some of the people that weren't ranked so highly, that thought they should have been, were most unhappy, and made my life actually quite miserable. But I think the only thing when you face those types of setbacks, and that's just one of many, is to get back up and continue doing what you believe in and continue fighting. Things don't always work out the way you want them to, but the life skill that's critical is to just bounce back. This is a platitude, I know, but it's a really true one. So there's a reason why most commencement speeches do mention this. Lastly, one that's a little quirky, which is, I think you need to remember your own life. In this modern era of the internet, of Wikipedia, of instant access on your smartphone, of open book tests, of being told it only matters to solve problems and not remember details, well, those are all true and they foster innovation and creativity, but there's a casualty to that, which is I've noticed people around me, the young people that I work with, there's no longer as strong a memory of what they've done 2 months ago, 6 months ago, or a year ago as I think there used to be. Don't lose that capacity. The thread that binds the you of today with the you of tomorrow is laying down good memories and retaining them. Memories are not iPhone photos in the cloud. Memories are in your mind. And so one thing I really think you should try to do, if you can remember, is to exercise your capacity to lay down rich memories. You'll be rewarded for this over and over, at home, at work, and in life. I'm at the end of my wisdom, what little there is. You're celebrating today a milestone. You'll have many more in your lives ahead. But I think this is a special one, and you've picked the right place to be. You're in health sciences. Health sciences is that powerful combination, as I said at the beginning, of science in the service of humanity. We share a common goal, all of us in this room, of trying to make people healthier, and that's a noble goal. So I'll leave you with 5 words. It's 5 words that I tell myself quite frequently when I sort of lose my way. It's what I tell my students and my fellows. Do good work that matters. It's that simple. Do good work that matters. Thank you and congratulations.